Hello everyone. So we've heard this expression before: the rich keep getting richer and the poor keeps getting poorer. And particularly the middle class, not even the poor people, the middle class people nowadays, the people who work a 9 to 5, pretty much 90% of the country, let's put it that way, are being squeezed from every angle. With electricity bills, with particularly rent and particularly other stuff, electricity prices, been squeezed to the bone basically. And the middle class has basically been wiped out and has basically become the poor class. What I mean by that is, there's no middle class nearly left because nobody can have a middle class life nowadays. And which is a sad thing to say because a lot of these people are working and doing their best, and it's not their fault that the situation they're in. But unfortunately, we see in Ireland the landlords etc. being catered to. We see the rich being catered to with tax cuts, with breaks etc. We see even in the UK, take for example Nigel Farage, the Reform Party, if they get into government, they want to give people over 70,000 a year a tax break. But there's nothing for the poor people. The poor people still left to suffer. And we see even in Finland, take for example, the True Finns and the National Coalition Party, we see them taken from the poor. They're literally taken from the poor and giving it to the rich. The idea of that is, the rich will create more jobs and will invest that money back into creating jobs and stuff in their dreams. And in theory, that's nice. But, in reality, it didn't work out. And the same with the corporation tax. All that money they thought they would reinvest didn't go anywhere. Basically, they kept it for themselves and went off to the bank with it. So in theory that works, but in a lot of cases it doesn't. In reality it doesn't. But in Ireland, it's always the thing. You always see the top people getting tax cuts, getting benefits from the state. We see this all the time. Like Ireland itself has become, all the TDs in the dollar multi-trillionaires, multi-millionaires that have more money than you and I can ever make in our lifetime. So they couldn't give a shit about the only person. What I'm trying to say. But long story short, um, even the landlords and stuff, like Ireland has become, there's a lot of millionaires in the last few years in Ireland because of the iPass sectors, etc. And of course they're getting tax cuts, tax breaks, etc. But the only 9 to 5 work of the middle class was in the so-called, the used to be middle class, that maybe would have a small house, etc. They're being forgotten about. They've been abandoned, possibly abandoned. And the government have thrown them to the side in favour of looking after the iPass sector owners, etc. And it's worrying to see because the middle class, unfortunately, as I say, it's nearly ceased to exist at the moment. And what I mean by the middle class, you used to be able to go on a holiday maybe once a year. Nowadays they can't. A lot of middle class families, and they used to be able to maybe do other stuff and have a cow, etc. But nowadays the middle class has been squeezed to the bone because they're not poor, but they're not rich. But at the same time, now they're becoming poorer because there's just so much economic pressure, and the wages haven't grown in so long for people, particularly, as I say, 90% of the country. Um, the wages haven't grown, and of course, the costs of living is fucking skyrocketed. And of course, that's causing issues, of course, for the middle class and particularly the poor people. Because the poor are getting poorer. Simple as that. Like, would obviously increase the electricity bills, increase the rent. The poor just keep getting poor and they never can kind of get off that ladder, if that makes sense. They get up to the upper stages of the middle class, etc. But the rich just keep getting richer. And this country particularly just keep getting richer. And the majority of them will be politicians, so you can see there's no really, and you think the people for profit and stuff want to look after the poor and stuff, look after the working class people, but that day is long gone where they care about the working class, to be totally honest with you. But it is an unfortunate thing when we see this in the world. We see it even in Finland, for example. They've literally robbed it from the poor to give to the rich, which doesn't make any sense. And of course, it's led to more people begging and more people looking for food and welfare, etc. Than there was before, which worked out well for them, sure. But they would tell you that the current government would say this worked out well, but in reality, it didn't. And they might not like to admit it, but it's the truth. But yeah, it's a total disaster economic policy in this country. But it's getting worse, unfortunately. Like, as I say, there's very few middle class families left because the world just become poor, and especially if young children, etc., and only have an ordinary job, a 9 to 5, working in a shop, stacking shelves, in a cafe, etc. You nearly need to be fucking an engineer for NASA to have to live in this country nowadays. Because the idea of the government too, and even in the elections and stuff, they were like, we're going to give tax breaks to people over 90k a year. But like very few people in this country on 90k a year. Maybe 5% of the whole population would be over 90k, nearly 100,000 a year. The only Joe would probably be only on about 30 to 40k a year, maybe the only Joe. There's very few to get over that bracket, and of course you get taxed a bit more. Actually, you get taxed more when you're low, like when you're on lesser wages. When you're on higher wages, you don't get taxed as much in this country. But again, it's just the whole system is against people. To be totally honest, that's just the whole system is against people who go up, get out to work in the morning and work hard, and it's for the people that sit in their house and do nothing. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. Like politicians and landlords. But anyway, let me know what you think. What do you think? Subscribe for more and bye.